Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and in this video we're breaking down Kill Bill. The movie's a masterpiece, and after rewatching it, I think it's Tarantino's best. Throughout the film, we follow the bride and watch as she plays this dangerous game of death. Filled with a wealth of Easter eggs, there's also major nods to films like Game of Death. That's the tracksuit I'm wearing right now, with it inspiring the bride's iconic costume later. Beyond that though, there's a wealth of references and a ton of callbacks to Tarantino's work. The film itself was even set up in Pulp Fiction, and it's possible this is all just a TV pilot from that universe.
It was a show about a team of female secret agents called Fox Force 5. Fox as in we're a bunch of foxy chicks. Force as in we're a force to be reckoned with. And 5 as in there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us. There was a blonde one, Somerset O'Neill. She was a leader. The Japanese fox was a kung fu master. The black girl was a demolition expert. French fox's specialty was sex.
What was your specialty?
Knives.
The movie was actually conceived back in 1994 when Tarantino and Uma Thurman were working on that film. They brainstormed the idea between takes and outlined the structure of the story. The pair then teamed up in 2000 to bring their little idea to life. Thurman actually came up with the opening scene where we see the bloodied beaten bride battered in her wedding dress. Due to this, the story's credited a Q and U for Quentin and Uma. Since 94, Thurman had gone through a big life-changing event and she gave birth to her daughter Maya in 1998. Maya is obviously a big name herself now, with her blowing up due to Stranger Things. However, her birth changed the original outline and took things in a slightly different direction. We'll talk more about that when we get to Volume 2, but it helped to shape the story later on. I will be talking spoilers for Volume 2 and how stuff pays off there, so if you haven't seen it yet, apologies, but it's difficult to really explain how good some of the breadcrumbs are if we don't at least acknowledge their eventual payoff. The story was written to reflect a more mature Thurman, and production was even delayed due to her giving birth. But Fox Force 5 was the original idea, and they picked up lots of threads left dangling in Pulp Fiction. Maya Wallace says how her character was the deadliest person with a knife, and we watched that play out in the movies. Even the list the bride crosses out says Death List 5. A Japanese actress was originally going to play O-Ren, but Tarantino was so impressed with Lucy Liu in Shanghai Noon that he changed the character. I think it was a great decision too. Her lineage adds a lot more depth to her character and makes her board meeting scene much more impactful. Part 1 and 2 were also shot back to back, with the first being released in 2003. The second was dropped just 6 months later, with lots of studios adopting this model at the time. The Lord of the Rings trilogy was all shot together, along with the second and third Matrix as well. It was a great time to be a fan of films, and there was always that sense of eagerness upon leaving the cinema. I think the MCU really capitalized off that feeling with Infinity War and Endgame, and yeah, the shorter space between it just maintains the hype. However, the movies were originally supposed to be a single film, but the runtime was deemed too long. Thus Tarantino cut them in half, but it's probably better than cutting things out just to fit one movie. Tarantino's films, they've also gotten longer and longer as he's been given more creative control. To me, he's up there with the likes of Nolan and Scorsese, where his name just brings hype to a film. Since then, he's done The Hateful Eight, Django Unchained, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, with them all getting close to or pushing beyond 3 hours. Grindhouse was also pushed as a double feature as well, so doing long films isn't out of his wheelhouse. What I love about Kill Bill though is that it says as much about the story as it does the director. The movie is a pastiche of every single influence Tarantino's experienced throughout the years. It feels like a combination of countless kung fu, western and blaxploitation flicks, with it referencing things he's absorbed over the years. They even mix in anime segments, and we get several references that all go into this melting pot. Now, similar to Pulp Fiction, the movie has a non-linear structure. Opening on the Shaw Brothers logo, this was the largest film company in Hong Kong for over 85 years. Founded by the Shaw Brothers, its symbols obviously a play on something that they didn't. Warner Brother they took. From here though, we cut to our feature presentation banner, and these things instantly show Tarantino's taking us through his influences. It also backs up the point of the original plan. In the 60s and 70s, drive-thrus and theaters would often roll double features. They'd show the B movie to help support the main one and give customers a bit more bang for their buck. B movies were cheap to make and easy to roll out with big releases, so they were commonplace to help prop up the main movie. However, as people started buying televisions en masse, the focus at the studios shifted to producing shows. So the budgets were placed to that instead of these films, and and thus the model died out. But with Kill Bill being volume 1 and 2, this would initially be used to call back to that. Over the top, we can also hear funky fanfare by Keith Mansfield. It can also be heard in his later movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood when Cliff drives to the drive-in theater, and it was also used in Grindhouse. This was rolled out with a feature presentation banner, so it's likely something Tarantino had fond memories of. After this, we then open with the phrase, "Revenge is a dish best served cold." This was first said in English in the translation of Eugene Sue's 1846 novel Memoirs of Matilda. Here though, it's attributed to being an old Klingon proverb, which is a reference to the Wrath of Khan.
Kirk, my old friend, do you know the Klingon proverb that tells us revenge is a dish that is best served cold?
Star Trek is referenced later on in the film when Sophia Fatale is introduced looking like a Star Trek villain.
Who's dressed like she's a villain on Star Trek.
Now when we meet the bride, she's not in the best state and we see our hero at her lowest point. I know these days there's a lot of talk about the female girl boss and how these characters are often infallible. So it's nice seeing that women can be seen as vulnerable and actually go on an arc that builds them as a character. Meeting the titular Bill, I love how Tarantino has his name on his hanky to tell us instead of just having the characters say it. Having him affectionately wipe her while also being the one who put her in this position, it's a great way to show his violent, caring nature. David Carradine casts a long shadow, and it's difficult to imagine Bill as anyone else. The martial arts legend had cemented his name in several projects over the years, including the show Kung Fu. There he played Kwai Chang Caine, a Chinese-American Shaolin master who traveled the American West. It blended Western and Eastern influences, just like this movie does. So the casting makes a lot of sense. However, Jack Nicholson, Kurt Russell, Mickey Rourke, Kevin Costner, and Burt Reynolds were all considered for the part. Warren Beatty was also really close to appearing in the final cut. In the end, he left due to creative differences, and they have kept quiet about exactly what this entailed. I do think Carradine fits it best though, and it's arguably the role he'll be remembered for. Tarantino wanted to bring different martial arts influences from around the world, and this is seen in the castings. Chai Hulu represented China, and Sonny Chiba was for Japan. Tarantino also said if Bruce Lee was still alive, he'd of course have been asked to star in the movie. He would of course appear in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and it's clear the director has a lot of love for the actor. Now we also get our first major Western reference here. The gun being pointed to her is based on The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, where the man with no name has the same thing happen. Similar to the man with no name, the bride's real name's also kept from the viewer. However, in part 2, we do learn her full name's Beatrix Kiddo. Bill here though, he refers to the bride as Kiddo, which does recontextualize things after seeing part 2.
No, kiddo.
Beatrix Kiddo.
Here.
Initially, you're just supposed to see it as a pet name, but I love how it changes this moment on a rewatch. Knowing this also makes a line O-Ren says later on have much more meaning.
Silly rabbit. Tricks are for kids.
That was the tagline of Trix cereal, so initially it's just seen as a reference to that. However, Trix forms part of Beatrix, and the surname Kiddo could be shortened to Kid. So Trix are for kids. Now because of this, you can assume O-Ren used to say this when they worked together.
Tricks are for kids, silly rabbit.
Now though we discover her name in part 2, there's actually a moment where you see it in this film. In a blink and you'll miss it shot, her name can be spotted on her plane ticket. Another great detail was spotted by Reddit user Dr. Aneurysm. In volume 1, if you turn the subtitles on, you may see Bill says kiddo and there's a lowercase k. However, in volume 2 when he says it, this becomes capitalized to denote it's her name. Now, we learn she's been attacked by her former colleagues and boss for the crime of running away. We discover that she's pregnant with Bill's child, which she mentions just before being shot by him. It's presumed that the baby didn't survive, but we learn in part 2 that she was taken by her father. The child has been named BB, which might be combining Beatrix and Bill. Beatrix explains in part 2 that she couldn't be an assassin, as being a mother was much more important. She wanted to leave Bill so her daughter wouldn't be turned into a killer and would at least have a chance at a normal life. This is mirrored in Venita Green, who he learns had a daughter as well. Now Bill never intended to actually kill Beatrix in this opening scene. He presumed she had been killed and he wanted to enact revenge, only to discover she was getting married and was pregnant. That then takes us into theory time, in the time. Okay, so considering how Bill's an expert killer, I do wonder if after hearing the baby was his, that he shot her in a way where he knew she wouldn't die. She'd need to be alive to deliver the baby, and thus he may have just put her in a coma. Thus he could have extracted the child later on, so I think the coma was on purpose. This is backed up later in the hospital scene with Buck. He says that her plumbing doesn't work anymore, so it could have been a side effect of taking the child. This is also backed up by what happens with Al Driver. He calls her off from poisoning Beatrix Beatrix in her sleep, and this would of course have been fatal. So he likely knew his shot wouldn't have killed her, but that's just a theory time. And their videos are still as cringe as they've always been.
More, give me more.
Now we've had a big start of the year, with January being crazy news-wise. Staying up to date with things when you don't know what the truth is can be difficult, but that's where our sponsors Straight Arrow News comes in. They report right down the middle and don't push any bias or spin to fuel the narrative. The site has a wide range of topics from politics to tech, but they're not trying to make you think a certain way. They also have the Media Mist tool, which lets you look at stories that are often underreported or not reported at all. On top of this, the site has an opinion section which possesses both left and right voices, so you can see things by the opposite side and then make up your own mind. Straight Arrow News are so good at delivering the news, they've been awarded by independent experts at all sides and Ad Fontes Media, who regularly assess the reliability of news outlets. They verified Straight Arrow News as being unbiased and have awarded them with a center rating and balance certification. Go to san.com/spoilers to check it out. You can subscribe through my link or scan the QR code on screen right now to go and get the app. When you subscribe, you not only support me, you're also supporting a group of journalists that are raising the bar on news and focused on serving you the truth. Huge thank you again to Straight Arrow News for sponsoring the video. Now let's get into the rest of the breakdown. Now from here we cut to the opening credits with Bang Bang, My Baby Shot Me Down by Nancy Sinatra. This was originally written by Sonny Bono and sung by Cher before blowing up when it was then sung by Nancy. Obviously it's a very on the nose summary of what we've seen thus far, with Bill shooting her down. However, this pays off in a big way when Beatrix finally meets her daughter. She says bang bang and pretends to shoot her, which brings this all full circle. Each of the Deadly Viper assassination squads then listed, with Lucy Liu as O-Ren first. Vivica Fox is then named next, with these two characters dying in volume 1. We also have Michael Madsen as Bud, with this being the second big role he had with Tarantino. Madsen played a big part in Reservoir Dogs, and both can be seen as the pair's big break. In flashbacks, Bud also looks similar to Madsen's character, and it's a further homage to that. We then see Daryl Hannah as L Driver. Now the name may possibly come from a production company owned by Tarantino himself. That was named Capital L Driver, and they produced the Full Tilt Boogie documentary, which was about making From Dusk Till Dawn. Tarantino wrote and starred in that movie, and thus it's a nice little Easter egg. Then lastly, we have Bill. Running the Deadly International Viper Assassination Squad, this neatly shortens to the acronym DIVA. Due to them all being named after snakes, it's even possible Tarantino is giving a nod to the Serpent Society. We then see the bride lying down in black and white. This is a reference to the opening of Citizen Kane, where we see Charles Foster Kane's corpse. The credits then end, listing this as Chapter 1 as a 2 circled. This is playing off Venita Green being number 2 in the credits, and she of course also appears as the second on Kiddo's list. When we see the list after the killing, we can see O-Ren Ishii's already been crossed off, meaning that the final fight took place before this first chapter. So this means that the order they appear in the credits foreshadows the order that they're killed in. The bride then arrives at Venita Green's house, and we hear an ice cream van jingle in the back. Now in the original script, Gogo was actually 2 characters. These were Yuki and Gogo, with the former seeking revenge. Yuki's the girl with a mask from the Crazy 88, but they ended up removing her as a fully fledged character. She obviously dies in the fight, but in the original plans, she was going to survive it. It was then going to be revealed that Yuki was in the ice cream van, slowly stalking the bride. That doesn't make it to the film, but I would have loved to have seen that appearing throughout. The house itself's also green, with a nice green lawn and that nice green little turtle sandbox that every kid should have. My kids have got it and they get sand in the house all the time now. I start staring and going... Anyway, Venita's last name's Green as well, so there you go, mate. Greatest film analysis channel on YouTube. She's now going by the name Jeannie Bell though, which is a homage to former Playmate and movie star Jean Bell. According to IMDb Trivia, the paintings on the wall were also provided by Rodney Greer. As you might have guessed, he's the brother of Pam Grier, who starred in Tarantino's Jackie Brown. One of the paintings also looks like a blood splatter, and it's a nice way to highlight Green's violent side hidden amongst his normal life. Answering the door, Green says,
"Sarah, I cannot believe you are early."
Obviously her daughter turns up later in the scene, so it's nice that they foreshadow that bit by having her expected to be her. It's here that we get one of the most memorable parts of the movie with that piercing siren playing. This has become such an iconic part of the movie, and every time Screen Crush posts a breakdown, I start to think about this. Overlaid, we can also see moments from the wedding attack, and also that the bride's clearly pregnant, which is a nice touch you might miss. Now, this song is actually the Ironside theme tune written by Quincy Jones. It also featured in Five Fingers of Death, where it was used when the protagonist would enact their revenge. So it plays really well into the themes of this movie. Much of the music in the films actually also sourced from soundtracks from other films, with Tarantino using his own collection. The close-up to the eyes is also a reference to the movie Death Rides a Horse. That also was the basis of the shot we see at the 35-minute mark, where the characters all look down on the bride. There we also have 3 women and 1 man though. That reminded me a lot of Charlie's Angel, with Bud being Bosley. Their outfits look a lot like the Doll Squad, which also inspired the classic TV show. Lucy Liu was of course a big part of the 2000s Charlie's Angels, and also its sequel. So it's nice that they all kind of tied together, and this shot similar to Tarantino's trademark trunk shot in Pulp Fiction. The trunk shot's also used again at the end when Sophie's in the back of the car. So it just brings together all these moments and makes for a really great scene. During the fight, we also see Beatrix wearing Onitsuka tiger shoes. These are the same brand that Bruce Lee wore during Game of Death, which complements the use of his iconic yellow outfit. This is paid tribute to during the fight at the House of the Blue Leaves, when Beatrix turns up in the same outfit. Later on, the Crazy 88 also wear Kato masks, with this being what Lee's character wore in the Green Hornet. Anyway, Venita's daughter arrives and interrupts the fight, and it works to emphasize the reason for Beatrix's rip-roaring rampage of revenge. She shows empathy and pauses though, and it highlights how she thinks kids should be shielded from this world. It's also fairly similar to the flashback scene in part 2. There she shows mercy to an assassin after she says she's pregnant. Now, I love how this whole thing's basically like Harry Potter, except we have assassins instead of wizards. Very John Wick, and yeah, lots of things going on behind the scenes that you might not know about. Why is my next door neighbor having a fight in the front garden with a samurai sword? Why? Tarantino has mentioned several times though that Nikki could also form the basis of a Kill Bill Part 3. That they could have the bride, and hell, maybe even Bibi played by Maya Hawke. I'd love to see them living a life of peace, only for Nikki to show up and come for revenge. In my opinion, Tarantino's movies have only gotten better as time's gone on, and yeah, just give the fans what they want. It's right there. The overhead shot is also very subtle, and it's done to show the divide between the 2 former friends. Beatrix explains how she could even kill her husband in order to get revenge, and as she says,
That would be even, Venita. That'd be about square.
This is a callback to Maya Wallace in Pulp Fiction, where she said the same thing. Wait a minute, that's a rectangle, Tarantino. You hack! We also see that Venita is still salty about not being called Black Mamba for, well, obvious reasons. This is possibly a reference to Mr. Pink though, who wanted a different name during the naming scene in Reservoir Dogs. Now we discover that Venita is actually living the life Beatrix wanted to have. She left, got married, and had a child, and I always felt like the scene kind of paints out the bride as the villain. Obviously her reasons are valid, but a part of me, it does want her to forgive her. When they organize the fight on the night, Venita even talks about doing it where she manages Little League Baseball.
There's a baseball diamond where I coach our little league about a mile from here.
So it's clear she's moved on, but the vengeful side of the bride now comes for her. I love how Beatrix says, getting knocked up won't stop what's coming, and yeah, this whole scene's perfect. There's no elaborate end to the fight either, like there is later on. Venita's killed, trying to take her out with a gun that's hidden in a box of cereal called Kaboom. Subtle, mate, Kaboom, subtle. However, this might be Tarantino referencing The Simpsons, as there they made fun of him by saying,
What I'm trying to say in this cartoon is that violence is everywhere in our society, you know? It's like even in breakfast cereals, man.
Telling Nikki she'll be waiting if she wants to get revenge. This is also a reference to The Punisher from '89. There, Frank Castle said to Tommy Franco he'd be waiting after he killed his father.
I'm gonna kill you.
I'll be waiting.
The bride then leaves and gets in the pussy wagon that she stole from Buck. Tarantino actually drove the truck around in real life, but had to stop doing it because it was obvious it was him. Has featured in several music videos though, with it also appearing in Missy Elliott's I'm Really Hot and Lady Gaga and Beyonce's song Telephone. The name may have been lifted from Grease's Grease Lightning, where the lyrics say, "You know that I ain't bragging, she's a real pussy wagon, Grease Lightning." We then see the license plate says Psy Wagon, and this allowed it to be shown on network television. There the sign was redubbed and altered to the Party Wagon, but hey, they said it in Grease, mate, it's fine. Sonny Chiba, who plays Hattori Hanzo's voice, can also be heard as Venita's names crossed out.
cute.
You can also spot the ice cream van moving down the street playing the jingle. Again, this was gonna be a big surprise down the line, and it's one of those elements I really wish they retained. Hitting chapter 2, we then flash back to 4 years and 3 months earlier. This subtly implies that the bride was only 3 months pregnant at the time of the massacre. Obviously, a baby born then would be greatly premature, so they'd need the coma to help it develop. Over the top, we can also hear a certain female by Charlie Feathers as the Texas Ranger arrives. You may be wondering why he has so many sunglasses on his dashboard, but this is a little Easter egg. In the opening of the original Gone in 60 Seconds, we had a similar shot with lots on the dashboard. The Ranger arriving and talking to the deputy also reminded me of the scene with Dennis Hopper in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. This is Michael Parks, who's playing the role of Earl McGraw. Parks played the same character in From Dusk Till Dawn, and he was killed by the two leads at the start. His son James Parks is his deputy, and he also played the same role in From Dusk Till Dawn 2.
9 dead bodies.
Later on, the bride says that they really should have killed 10, with that extra number being due to her baby. After spitting up her blood, we then cut to the bride in hospital as Elle Driver makes her entrance. Here we catch her whistling a theme which comes from the movie Twisted Nerve. Split screen part is really cool, as again, it shows a divide between the two characters like we had with Green. Tarantino said he was inspired by the works of Brian De Palma, who has been known for his split screen shots. This was most notably in Carrie, but he also did it in Dress to Kill. I feel like that's what Quentin's referencing, as it also has a nurse who kills. The bride's name is also beeped throughout the film.
Hi, honey. I'm Mr. Steve.
This is likely a reference to De Palma's film Greetings, in which a similar thing happens. Now, according to IMDb trivia, the view from the trees through the window was taken from the 1990 film ID, which I haven't checked and I don't know where it is, but apparently that's what it says in the trivia. Originally in the script though, we were going to learn that Bill was a master chemist and he concocted this deadly cocktail. Titled Goodbye Forever, other syringes would have other purposes. The bride would use the undisputed truth to get the info from Sophie, and Bill would then use it on Beatrix in Volume 2. So it brings it all together really nicely, but they ended up cutting it, which you can kind of understand. Elle is a blonde bombshell just like Beatrix, but because of this, it's built a jealous rage in her. Elle is unable to outdo Beatrix, no matter how hard she tries. She's even the new lover of Bill, but clearly Bill's just trying to replace Beatrix with the next best thing. He clearly still has feelings as well, as he calls off the hit and won't let Driver do it. Now we know Elle failed to live up to her, and we discover that she also went to Pai Mei. However, he took Elle's eye, which is a great little detail that we learn in part 2. Now the character also builds nicely off Venita. Whereas Venita went on to have the life she wanted, Elle's now taken the life that she had. The poisoning with the syringe is straight out of the movie Black Sunday, and her codename's California Mountain Snake. While that snake's not venomous, it is actually deadly to other snakes as it's resistant to venom. The bride's codename was the Black Mamba, with the Black Mamba also being a snake. So we have the Californian Mountain Snake trying to take out another snake, which is a great way to play into their names. Bill also discusses how she deserves her chance for revenge, which plays into the sort of rules the assassins have. This is also something the bride displayed with Nikki, and I love how there's this honor amongst thieves. We then see as Beatrix wakes up after a mosquito takes her blood. The way she jolts up suddenly could also be a reference to Pulp Fiction. There her character wakes up after an overdose. I did wonder if the mosquito sticking to her was supposed to be a reference to the needle that woke her up there. It's a harrowingly emotional scene as she then realizes her child's gone. Looking at her hands, she then discovers it's been 4 years. Now how she does this was going to be explored in a scene in which she traveled around the world. Beatrix studied palmistry, which allows her to read her palms. Part of these teachings is to denote the passage of time, and that's how she can do it. It also shows Tarantino's got a hand fetish as well as a foot one. You might also notice that her heart rate's really fast, but when she hears Buck, this then starts to lower. It shows she can regulate her heartbeat and is a great bit of character that highlights her skills. Now we learn that Buck's a nurse who's basically pimping her out while she lies there comatose. We see the hypocrisy exemplified in the character's cross, which he wears while carrying out these horrendous acts. You might also notice the sunglasses that Beatrix is gonna steal. These Elvis glasses are the ones Christian Slater wore in True Romance, which was written by Tarantino. If you're an Adam Sandler fan, you might also recognize Buck's client, who's played by Jonathan Loughran. He was in a lot of Sandler's earlier movies, and that laugh's just etched into my brain. The Vaseline tub close-up we get as well. Phew, dear me. Smashing Buck's head like the like button, we then hear his catchphrase.
My name is Buck,
and I'm here to
This might have been a reference to the movie Eaten Alive, where Robert Englund says, "I'm Buck and I'm raring to
Name's Buck. I'm raring to
We then get the absolute most well-known trademark from Tarantino as the bride tries to wiggle her big toe. Focusing on her feet, you can imagine the director behind the chair just drooling away there. Does it in Pulp Fiction, to Death Proof, to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and yeah, Tarantino has become infamous for his focus on feet. According to IMDb Trivia, this is also reference to the Alfred Hitchcock Presents episode Breakdown, which had a car crash survivor trying to signal he was alive. As this is going on, we get a good look at the past and are introduced to O-Ren. This shot is taken right out of Lady Snowblood, and it's such a cool moment. We then get the incredible anime style scene that tells us the story of the character. It was made by Production IG, who also worked on the seminal Ghost in the Shell. At this time, anime was becoming huge in the West. Spirited Away had won Best Animated Picture at the 2002 Oscars, and it was really getting attention. MT has done a great breakdown of the Studio Ghibli classic, and if you want to check it out, yeah, go in the link below. The Animatrix had also come out the same year as this movie. Kids were being shown things like Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball Z, and Cartoon Network was pushing a lot of things on Toonami. So Tarantino really had his finger on the pulse, and it shows how much he was invested in the culture to be pushing it in this film. We then see her parents killed by assassins, and Carradine confirmed one of them was a young Bill. This was theorized for a while due to the rings the characters had, and then the actor confirmed it. The clue was that they were just like the one Bill had when he spoke to Elle on the phone. We then see O-Ren kill the boss who was involved in the family's death.
I'm getting the word. Nonce.
Getting her revenge at 11, she pretty much follows the path of the bride. Bill being involved in the death of her family also makes her very akin to Beatrix. However, she goes after the boss and just ends up working for Bill instead of taking him down. The idea of taking out nonces is also mirrored in Gogo, who kills the man flirting with her later. The guy's a complete creep and does it even though she's wearing a school uniform. She stabs him in the crotch, which is also something her character does in Battle Royale. Now we see O-Ren at the age of 20 in a full bodysuit with cropped hair. Again, you can clearly see the Ghost in the Shell references, and it's such a creative scene. After this moment, the bride then says,
But on that day, 4 years ago, she made one big mistake. She should have killed 10.
This again is a reference to Death Rides a Horse, with a line being,
The bandits who killed 5 defenseless people made one big mistake. They should have killed 6.
We then see 13 hours later and catch the bride getting out the wagon. There's a pull behind the back wheel, and this is just under where she was sitting. Now, according to the trivia, this is actually a puddle of urine due to her sitting there for 13 hours. The bride then departs Okinawa, and the plane map's reminiscent of the one used in Indiana Jones. The plane scene with the orange sky and shot of the pilots is also an homage to the opening of Gokei Body Snatcher from Hell. The plane also shows air with an arrow to an O, which is the bride taking the air to O red, which is probably a reach, but we're being thorough. One thing I love though is that the planes also have holders for the passengers' katanas. You can see that in better detail on the way back and can catch one in the seat beside her. We then meet Hattori Hanzo, played by legendary Japanese actor Sonny Chiba. Hanzo's named after the real-life legendary samurai, and it shows how well Tarantino knew the culture. Now Chiba has played Hanzo before, and this was in the TV show Shadow Warriors. Tarantino stated that this is what inspired the name, and thinks of this movie's Hanzo as a descendant of the one from the show. His daughter Juri also appears in the movie later on and plays a crazy 88 member who's killed in the sword fight. We learn Hanzo took an oath to never make another sword due to his student Bill. Bill became a relentless killer for hire, and thus I think this weighed on Hanzo's conscience. It's possible this may even be a nod to the Winchester house, in which its occupants thought it was haunted. The Winchesters believed they were haunted by the ghosts of everyone who'd ever died due to their weapons. Thus they kept building extensions, and it made it like a labyrinth with some passages that went absolutely nowhere. Oppenheimer of course showcased regret over building the atomic bomb, and I feel like these aspects were the basis for Hanzo. We have a Japanese man who made a weapon that killed countless people, and he gave this to an American. So I might be reaching with that, and it might be a flip, but it's clear that there's still a lot lot of remorse in the character. Part 2 implies that Bill trained under Hanzo just as he did with Pai Mei, so it's clear the pair knew each other well. Hanzo's blades are said to be the sharpest ever made, and they look sharper than me in a James Bond breakdown. This edge can be seen as the bride later slices the baseball in half effortlessly. This was actually done for real on set by Zoe Bell, who worked as the stunt double of Uma Thurman. In what's a nice little gift, they actually gave her the Bell mailbox from the start after the scene wrapped. They didn't intend for her to have it at the start, but after realizing her surname was Bell, it made sense to just give it as a nice little gift, which she then said she'd give her parents, and I want to find out where they live because I need to take a selfie beside that mailbox. I also love how the bride pretends she can't speak Japanese. She does kind of give it away though, as when Hanzo and his staff are arguing, she has to bite her lip due to laughing. So it shows she can understand them, but is just playing dumb to get Hanzo on her side. Shout out to Reddit user Tran77A who pointed out the dialect change as well. Apparently Hanzo starts off with the typical dialect you'd get from an Okinawan, but this alters to the traditional Japanese after Beatrix drops his name. I love how the bride goes through his collection, and it's shot almost like just going to a regular store and seeing an item you really like. Although Hanzo supplies a sword, it's clear it's just so he can take out his previous student. I'll not theory time it, but again, it backs up the prior point. The sword being handed over is almost like a religious ceremony, and it's clear the honor that comes from getting a Hanzo sword. So like buying a Heavy Spoilers t-shirt, and did you know we have lots of them on the store below. Whether it's our Disney shill one, if you're gonna spoil the movie Warner Brother, our Alien Chestburster, Sith Happens, or even a Theory Time, it's all there, and you'll look fantastic, all while supporting videos just like this, which we love you for. Cutting to chapter 5, we then learn Bill propped up O-Ren amongst the other gangs. It's here that we meet Sophie Fatale, and also Gogo. Sophie was actually present at the massacre at El Paso, and we hear her answer the phone with a ringtone of Auld Lang Syne. In Japan, this is known as Hataru no Hikari, or Glow of the Firefly, which I've definitely butchered. Auld Lang Syne though, it's about how old acquaintances shouldn't be forgotten, and it's obviously ironic as it's used in the scene where they beat up the bride. Gogo is also played by Chiaki Kiruyama, who appeared in Ju-on the Curse. It's a fantastic film, and I've wanted to break it down for a while because I did a big J-horror binge when I broke down The Ring. Dark Waters is another classic as well, and Tarantino said he really got into the Grudge universe when those movies released. Now, as mentioned before, she was also part of Battle Royale, which Tarantino named as his favourite film. So her casting here makes a lot of sense. Now, Gogo Yubari is in fact two references, with Gogo being the name of the character from Speed Racer. Yubari, on the other hand, that was where Tarantino first went to in Japan to showcase his film Reservoir Dogs. We then see how insecure O-Ren is about her heritage and not being fully Japanese, which comes with the very salty boss Tanaka. Portrayed by Jun Kunimura, he was cast after Tarantino saw Minichi the Killer. After this, no one speaks about her American heritage as they're all afraid of what could happen. One thing you might also notice about O-Ren's sword is that the handle also doesn't have a guard. These are in place to protect you during a fight so people can't run the blade down and slice off your hand. However, as we've seen so far, all of O-Ren's victims have been struck down with one hit, so there's no need for her to have this. O-Ren then decides to head off, and we see as a fountain of blood spews out Tanaka's wound. This was a trope in Japanese samurai movies that's become a staple over the years. Starting with Kurosawa's classic Sanjuro, it's continued in things like Lady Snowblood, which this movie's heavily inspired by. In an interview with Robert Rodriguez, Tarantino said they made the blood effects the old school way by using Chinese condoms filled with fake blood. The actors would then hold them and they'd pop them as they were killed. Over 450 gallons of fake blood were used for the film, which led to the crazy 88 fight scene being in black and white. For the US release at least. However, if you track down a Japanese version of the film, you'll see the whole scene's in colour. Now, we then see that O-Ren speaks just English, with this being translated by Fatale. Her name's an on-the-nose reference to the femme fatale archetype, because yeah, this is all basically a TV pilot. I love the way Lou delivers his speech though, and it's kind of like customer service at the start until it just goes absolutely insane. As she holds up Tanaka's head, another great detail can be spotted with the model's eyes. These are looking up instead of forward because they would have been looking up at her on the table. We then see Beatrix arrive in Japan with a really obvious model of Tokyo as the plane descends. These models were actually leftovers from the recent Godzilla films, with them also using stuff from King Ghidorah Giant monsters all-out attack. As the plane lands, we can see an energy drink billboard that has Gogo on it. To the right of this is also a billboard for Red Apple cigarettes. Now these Red Apple cigarettes are a fictional brand that Tarantino created, and they've appeared in Pulp Fiction, From Dusk Till Dawn, The Hateful Eight, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. We get a much better look at the ad for this at the airport, and we see as the bride walks past it. Again, Sophia Fatale's on it, and it highlights how the gangs have infiltrated everything. In the advert, she also has just one arm, which sort of foreshadows what happens to her other arm down the line, because it gets chopped off. Now Beatrix then follows Sophie. Sophie knows she's being tailed, and Tarantino just can't help himself as we see a shot of her open-toed shoes. He's like Laris from House of the Dragons, that guy. Now it's at this point that we cut to the House of the Blue Leaves. We then hear the insanely cool song Battle Without Honor or Humanity as the gang arrive. The song was previously featured in the movie New Battles Without Honor and Humanity, and it starred the composer Tomiyasu Hotai, which nailing the pronunciation there. Whenever I think about this movie though, I just imagine them walking down in slow motion to this song. The long take and stuff they do here, it reminds me a lot of Goodfellas, namely the one restaurant scene that we have in that. Continuing on with the music, we have the 5, 6, 7, 8 song I'm Blue. The band actually appear in the movie as well, which is a really good inclusion. They also play their song Woohoo, which you couldn't escape on the radio around the time of the movie's release. Performing barefoot, I think this Tarantino guy might have something that he likes about feet. I do get sort of Star Wars vibes here though, with O-Ren almost sensing the bride and throwing a knife outside. It's like Vader sensing Obi-Wan on the Death Star, and it makes for such a great scene where Beatrix Spider-Mans herself on the ceiling. Getting an overhead one-shot take, this again feels reminiscent of Goodfellas, and it highlights Tarantino's skill as a director. Going with her, then back into the main hall, following Sophie, this is a masterclass of direction and camera work. While this is going on, we also see the restaurant owner talking about what happened with Tanaka. They basically say they need to give in to any of the Crazy 88's crazy demands, and it always makes me laugh how he's dressed a bit like Charlie Brown.
Charlie Brown.
Now IMDb Trivia pointed out a nice little connection here to Lost in Translation. Both feature Americans in Japan and have a character called Charlie Brown. That was directed by Sofia Coppola, and her and Tarantino dated at the time. Shortly after, O-Ren's called out by name, and we see just Beatrix's mouth.
O-Ren Ishii!
It's very, very similar to how Mia Wallace spoke to Vincent via microphone when he arrived at her house.
Vincent.
As Beatrix steps over the glass floor, you can also pause the scene and spot something on her shoes. Yep, got a big FU spelled out on both soles, and it's such a cool inclusion for what's a very, very short shot. Slicing through the first guy's sword, we then see Beatrix wipe out the Crazy 88s with ease. Even just things like her slicing them and tapping her sword before they all fall over, it's absolutely fantastic. Feels like you can really see Tarantino just consumed hundreds of films and then brought them all together perfectly here. Laying them out easily, she then faces Gogo with her ball and a chain, which still looks brilliant. The bride doesn't want to kill her as she's just a kid, and she even gives her the chance to walk away. She uses the ball to strangle Beatrix though, which is also similar to a scene in Dario Argento's Deep Red. The ball itself is akin to a Chinese meteor hammer, and it's also similar to a rope and dot. Jackie Chan used a horseshoe and rope to make something similar in Shanghai Noon, and even swung around his neck similar to how Gogo does here. However, the bride gets the best of her. She uses a table leg and nails her. The final shot of Gogo dead with bloodied eyes is something that's lived rent-free in my head ever since. This shot is similar to one in 1980's City of the Living Dead, and it's a great way to end the character. What you might also notice is that as she lays on the ground, her night tick remains white because the blood only soaked into the fabric. O-Ren asks if she thought it would be that easy, and the bride's then swarmed by the rest of the 88. Throughout, you'll constantly see her staring at her blade, and this is in order to see who's sneaking up behind her. This is visually similar to a very cool scene in Fist of Fury where Bruce Lee fights an entire martial arts school. As mentioned previously, the movie switches to black and white here, and this is due to the sheer amount of blood used in the scene. It's a brutal set piece, complete with axe throws and beheadings, and in one particularly gruesome part, we see a person split in half, which is just like Ichi the Killer. I did wonder if O-Ren's surname Ishii was also a nod to that movie, though the spellings are different. so it's probably a reach, but moving on. Now, due to YouTube, bloody YouTube, we can't show a person getting split in half, so just like imagine it or something. Imagine all these scenes it's really gory, that bit. Whoa, what's going on here? It's crazy. They also start to include some wire work, and it becomes like a crouching tiger, hidden dragon. That film really pushed its use to the forefront in the West, but it has to be said, you know, it was used in the genre throughout. It's more of a fanciful and elegant kind of fight, with characters flying around as opposed to the realistic Bruce Lee movies that we'd seen up until then. Speaking of Lee, we then see the bride spin on the floor and take out the gang's legs. Shoutouts to Olympus Man on Reddit for pointing out that this is a nod to when Lee did something similar in Fists of Fury. We then hear Nobody by the Human Beings play, and the lights cut out, which is a very neat touch as her eyes close and we switch to a blue light with shadows. This itself's a reference to Samurai Fiction's opening scene where we see two silhouettes dueling in front of a red light. Now, this scene was performed by stuntwoman Zoe Bell and shot in silhouette due to the difficulty of the moves. Thurman was unable to pull them off, and thus they had Bell do it and hit her face with the shadows. The fight then ends with her spanking one of the 88.
Go home to your mother!
This was a nod to Yojimbo when the protagonist tells the character to go home to his mother, ending with an 88 going into a pool of water. This feels like a nod to the end of Scarface. The bride then tells them to leave their limbs as they now belong to her. This gets further explained in part 2 as Pyman refuses to let go of her arm as he says it belongs to him now. The scene then leads into what's a beautiful snow fight duel. This moment is heavily lifted from the movie Lady Snowblood, with O-Ren wearing a similar outfit for the snow-covered duel here. She mentions that the fight may not last 5 minutes, and from the time it starts to the final strike, it's 4 minutes 59, which is such a cool detail. We then see Beatrix get sliced on the back, which reminded me a bit of the anime One Piece. There the character Zoro says how a wound on the back's the shame of a swordsman. As O-Ren's defeated, we see a shishi or doshi that thumps when it's full of water. This is intended to scare deer away, but it's also a little Easter egg. This is a nod to the Seven Samurai, which features the repeated thump of a watermill. O-Ren then apologizes for insulting her earlier. She talks about a Caucasian playing samurai, which mirrors her own insecurities about her heritage. Now, Tarantino was going to have Beatrix cut her head off, but he decided against it, as then she wouldn't realize that the sword was indeed a Hanzo original. O-Ren's name's then crossed out, and as mentioned earlier, the bride then goes on to kill Green. However, Fatal is left at the hospital as she isn't listed as being on the revenge list. Sophia is then interrogated in an iconic trunk shot as Bill then speaks to Sophie about her betrayal. She's kept alive simply to be a messenger, which is normally an act of mercy carried out in revenge stories. She also gives up the names of the deadly vipers, and Beatrix writes the list, which is just like the movie The Mercenary. We then see Bud saying that she deserves her revenge, and it sets up Volume 2 really nicely. Now, according to IMDb trivia, Bud was actually named after one of Tarantino's favourite directors, Bud Bodecker. Bell then warns him that Beatrix is on her way. Not going to warn Venita then, mate. Elle also says she must suffer to her last breath as we see her look from part 2. This design was inspired by a cruel picture, which has a young girl getting revenge on a man who abused her. The bride then asks how Bill found her in a flashback, to which he says he's the man. Now at this point, only her eyes and earrings are in colour. The green earrings may be a callback to Bill's green ring that we saw around the 23-28 mark, and we also saw a blue shirt under his jacket. The scene with Sophie is also shot with a bluish hue, which might be his trademark colour. We close out the film asking whether she's aware her daughter's alive, and that sets up part 2 perfectly. And we will of course also be back for that. We're currently working between the Batman Burton series, The Matrix, Alien Covenant, this, and of course James Bond. So lots of stuff to look forward to, and I do want to continue with Fincher, but beyond Zodiac, I'm not sure how much more there is detail wise, but yeah, send me your recommendations below. Did you know that members of the channel also get early access to videos? If you click the join button, you'll get at least one breakdown a week before anyone else. It costs just 99 cents a month, and we've tried to set it where hopefully it's not a lot to you, but if a lot of you guys do it, it will mean a lot to us. Huge thank you again to everyone who signed up to that. You know, it makes a massive difference to the channel, takes the pressure off me, and just means we can focus on these bigger deep dives, because we're not like, what's a new thing we need to cover, quick, get it out the door. So thank you again. Now if you want something else to watch, you've got a breakdown on screen right now. It's another classic movie. You guys are gonna love it. I know that because YouTube selected it from their algorithm as something that you specifically would like, and they know everything about you, mate, so don't try and avoid it, yeah? Click that video, go watch it, and I'll see you on the next one. With that out of the way, thank you for sitting through this one. I've been your host Paul, you've been the best, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.